Brant DXT grain carts have efficient unload speeds, large carrying capacities, unmatched durability, and reliable components that make sure your cart is working when you are. Lead the field with DXT grain carts from Brant. Visit your local Brant dealer for more information.
I'm sure a lot of you have read the book, The Art of the Deal, which was written by the U.S. President Donald Trump. And it's deals, deals, deals week, apparently, as we approach that August 1st deadline and that extension of those reciprocal tariffs from Tariff Liberation Day, as the president called it. Joining us to break it all down and what do we know, especially into that deal between the U.S. and Japan, it is D.C. policy analyst Jim Wiesemeyer. Hey, Jim, how are we doing?
Pretty good. I think we did see big news overnight because the Trump's Asia tariff deals, but especially Japan, it signals a new trade order, Shaun, and especially with Japan because they're very pleased with the way Japan got aggressive, and they suggested to Trump and his people, I guess, a month ago for investment clauses in this, and that apparently won Trump over big time.
Yeah, that's the $550 billion that's been described as like they're the underwriter, it's a loan or it's an equity invest. There's a different parameters to it and details are going to come out, and 90% of the profits stay in the U.S. And the president decides essentially where that money will be invested. Very interesting and maybe I don't know, maybe unprecedented. Have you heard about something like this before?
Well, especially from because this is in addition. Our Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said this is in addition to their investments now, so that remains to be seen. But also a key phrase: it's up to $550 billion. So then that tells you, well, you have to watch this thing. But the White House is already targeted certain sectors for that: semiconductors, microelectronics, pharmaceuticals, steel and shipbuilding,
Yeah.
and critical minerals and automotive industries. In other words, build more plants in the United States to build Japanese cars.
Secretary Rollins said that this is the biggest trade deal ever. What's the ag angle on this? Is it rice? I haven't seen much about beef, but rice definitely is getting some attention.
75% more rice from the United States than they currently purchase. Now, they're not changing the tariffs. We They have a 770,000, I believe, yes,
Yes.
tariff-free quota. Now, the U.S. last fiscal year got 45% of the total. Now, if reports are correct that Japan said they'll buy 75% more rice from the U.S., that equates to 78.75% of the tariff-free quota, or a little over 606,000 tons. Bottom line, at least on paper, it's a win for U.S. rice.
Any mention of other commodities, Jim? At this point, we're
Not
less than
at this. That
24
has to
hours
be
here. So
fleshed out. That has to be fleshed out. They just said they'll make $8 billion in purchases of U.S. agriculture and other products.
yeah.
So we've had no fact sheet on Japan. That's what I would watch out for in the next week or so. Now, Trump and or his top officials are going to be meeting with Japan again to work out further details. So I think we'll see some more meat on this framework agreement relatively soon.
What about Indonesia? What do we? Sign. Is there something? Is there not something?
Oh, there's
What's been
something.
agreed
Yeah,
to
they
there?
had a joint White House put out a joint Indonesia White House agreement. Plus, you always look for those fact sheets, at least in the U.S.
Yeah.
They put also out a fact sheet on Indonesia, and again, Indonesia, these things overnight, there was win-wins for both. Japan got what they wanted. Indonesia got what they wanted. They wanted no labor law changes, and they didn't. That no labor law changes are required. But again, we have to see in that fact sheet, it's going to be good for U.S. agriculture, some of these things. So I think that we're starting to see, Shaun, the trade war fog lift a bit. And I think you're seeing it definitely in Japan equities. I mean, the
Yeah.
automobile stocks surged overnight. You've got the U.S. stock market's up a little bit, around 200 points. The S&P 500 is barely up, but now we're getting some certainty here. So now the key is now the other big kahunas would be Canada, Mexico, the EU. I think the EU is the big one that they really want to do. And Treasury Secretary Bessent said early this morning he was more upbeat regarding the EU than he had been previously. So that remains to be
Yeah.
seen. But Canada, as you well know, that's a little it's a little dicey. It's a little dicey.
Yeah, but I don't know. I'm not as worried about the August 1st deal here. Like, because I don't think the administration in the US wants to leave this as is, where it's actually more expensive for GM to import a car from Canada or Mexico into the US. That's more expensive than importing cars from Japan. That doesn't make sense really,
No.
I think, to a lot of people. They don't want that. I'm a little bit more worried a year from now. That's where I'm a little bit more worried. And when we have this Kuzma USMCA potential renegotiation,
Yeah.
that's where I think there's a lot of rubber to hit the road, and there's going to be some debris.
Well, what I hear that they're wanting from Canada is that Canada should focus more on targeted concessions on Chinese trade and customs. I don't think they're talking about as much China in Canada as the U.S. wants. At least that's what I'm hearing. And Canada also should secure as many product and sector specific tariff exemptions as possible to help them out, rather than aiming what they want for a complete tariff removal.
Mm.
So I think we're seeing if they continue to talk, and they are almost every day, as you well know. So I think eventually, yes, an agreement will be worked out with Canada. I totally agree with you. Trump is targeting that 2026 renegotiation of the what we call the USMCA.
Yeah. So, right now, USMCA compliant goods face zero tariff. Okay. But that'll form the base of a lot of the discussions a year from now, I think. And agriculture on both sides of the 49th parallel, especially in the beef and pork and lots of other integrated sectors, are going to have a real fit, and not a good one, if there is something like a 15% or 10% tariff
Yeah.
across the board. That
Yeah.
we're going to hear a lot from farm groups.
This is why I mentioned I think both countries should strive for sector specific exemptions rather than an across the board goal of 0%, really like what we have in USMCA.
Yeah.
And at least that's the parameters I hear right now. But Trump, I'll tell you what I think the market fails to understand initially. Trump likes these tariffs, at least at 10%, and now it looks like 15%, for many countries, for the tariff money it's bringing in, no matter who on the discussion who's really paying for that. It gives him billions of dollars to work with, Shaun, in many different ways. And by the way, U.S. agriculture gets 35% of that tariff revenue.
Yeah, you and I have been working out the math going back and forth via text, but one of the outcomes floated. This is going back to even in the campaign last fall, is to remove federal income tax. Well, at a 15% across the board non-USMCA blanket tariff, you could have no federal income taxes for everybody making under $80,000 in the U.S. But the
Yeah.
other one that came up this week on primary residences, maybe we should get rid of the capital gains tax. Now, that's a much more affordable exemption.
Yeah, and Trump has floated that overnight, by the
Yeah.
way. And I think they're gearing up, by the way, for the next reconciliation bill in Congress this fall. I think we're going to see another one or two the next year and a half. And to get buy-in for that, you have to get into some further tax cuts, and that's why this small gains on home sales will come into play and get more than a few votes on the Republican side.
On the Canada-U.S. front, Jim, there's a lot of people running around inside Canada talking about how Trump wants to get rid of supply management. I have been saying I don't think so. If you actually listen to dairy groups, they're not saying that. And if you look at the UK trade deal and the Japan one, agriculture, those countries have been able to hold the fortress on ag. We've
Yes.
seen incremental changes. So like, hey, positive change. It's all about, incremental changes and it's a step forward. That was the case on beef into the UK. It kind of looks that way a little bit on rice into Japan. That kind of fits very much into this dairy discussion between Canada and the U.S., where it's really about the change in the definition of the allocation of the TRQs, not necessarily bringing down the whole system.
I
What do you
agree
think?
totally. I agree totally. Yes. Again, and his top people, Besson and Lutnick, they really want to get into areas basically outside ag, and it's in that investment area.
Yeah.
It's in automobiles with Canada. It's with that border control, fentanyl, fentanyl. You know the issues, and I think eventually there's going to be the right language at the right time, and we do have time for it, as you said. But on dairy, yeah, I think that there's an understanding, at least here, that your supply management for dairy and poultry is basically considered very touchy and non-negotiable by both the government and others.
No different than Japan is with rice, or UK is with certain restrictions, unscientific restrictions, but restrictions on things like beef. So,
Yeah,
um,
and see, Trump will use that as leverage. He'll say, "Okay, we'll give you that.
yeah,
Now, what are you going to give us?" Again, the win-win. I'm seeing win-wins in the Japan one, and I'm seeing win-win across the board for some of these other ones. The big surprise, and I think you will agree with this, Shaun, because we talked about it before, if they ever have an agreement with India.
yeah,
Because I'm going to see it because they'll usually, much like in their former WTO negotiations and the GATT round, India was always the hardest, if not impossible, to get on board. And I learned that many years ago. And I want to see if, even with a tiered approach, well, a phase one, phase two, phase three, if you get any phase with India, it's a success. But Europe and Canada and Mexico are the holy grail right now. And Trump wants those by fall. I would say by fall
yeah,
this year. By
yeah.
fall this year.
And the key pillars of these deals have been, this is my perception, planes, autos, and energy. Those are really those are the ones where we're seeing definitely movement and getting a lot of focus.
Yes,
Yeah.
investment in those industries. Absolutely. And see, that's Trump 101. He wants to build, he wants to invest, and he wants the private industry involved in this. And that's why they're emphasizing what they are.
Yeah. Hey, Jim, before we wrap up, what else is going on in DC that's keeping you you're paying attention to as we head into the dog days of summer here?
Well, we've got a Prop 12. That's the
Yep.
angle with California and other states, kind of putting an albatross on pork buys. They're having a hearing in the House Ag Committee today. That's still going to be a hurdle to get in, even with the farm bill. We're going to have another farm bill that they call the so-called skinny farm bill by the end of September, I think. If not, we'll have an extension. So we're watching that. The House is already, well, they're leaving this afternoon, Wednesday, the House of Representatives, because they want to get out of town rather than tying into all this Epstein stuff that you've no
Yeah.
doubt been hearing about. But no, now we're going on budgets. It's all budgets all the time now, and lawmakers are once again way behind the funding curve. So now the story when they come back in September will be, will there be a shutdown of the government? So here we go all over again on that.
Yeah.
But other than that, what we're watching is some problems with the corn and soybean crop, but not many. We're looking at a potentially huge crop situation, which makes trade policy so important because
Critical.
that'll help get rid of the stuff, as we say.
Yeah, we're a lot of concern about this, these intense heat domes that's right over the Midwest right now. It's a scorching week in on many parts of the corn acre in the U.S., but still, we're on the optimum yield curve still here.
Unbelievable. And watch your nighttime temperatures. Again, you learn many things when you're as old as I am. But for corn, those nighttime temperatures, even with hot daytime temperatures, are important because the corn crop needs to breathe. And if they can get it down there overnight, they can take the heat wave to a certain time frame.
Great stuff. Hey, Jim, thanks so much for joining us here today. Really appreciate it.
Anytime.
For the latest ag news, agronomic advice, and more, check out realagriculture.com and Real Ag Radio.